Hello, I'm Dan Hyde, a partner at Harrison Clark Rickaby's, a leading technology law firm specializing in all manner of tech regulation. And welcome to How to Use Blockchain in Business. With me, I have Sam Thomas. Sam is something of a pioneer in blockchain and crypto. He sits on the IT panel of the Bar Council, which for those that don't know is the council that looks after barristers, and Sam is a barrister. He's also written some of the leading titles on crypto regulation, blockchain regulation, and cybersecurity, just to name but a few.
Well, Dan, you know about the books because we wrote them together. Cybersecurity, Law and Practice was our first book, although there's a second edition of that. And then the book that I think is really important for today is Blockchain and Cryptocurrency, International Legal and Regulatory Challenges, which we're writing the second edition of now.
We are. That's a lovely plug as well for all those that are listening and probably thinking of how they can get their hands on that really quickly.
Available in all good bookstores.
Yeah, shame they've missed Christmas, but I think before we start delving into how blockchain can be used in a business sense and a cybersecurity sense, maybe we just explain a little bit about what blockchain essentially is. Because just to set this up, blockchain is the name that everyone tends to use, but it's actually just a form of a digital ledger technology.
Well, what you've got to think about is a ledger. Okay, so it's a piece of paper effectively that people are writing content on. Yeah. Okay, but the important thing and the exciting thing about blockchain is it's indelible. It cannot be destroyed. Effectively, what you've got is you've got that piece of paper with all the writing on, but there are millions of copies all around the world. And if you destroyed any one copy, it doesn't matter because there's 999,999 other copies still out there.
Yeah.
But the other thing about the copies is that they're changing simultaneously. So each copy is updating simultaneously.
I think this is useful because one of the questions I often get is, what's so great about usability? And effectively, that's what you've just explained. This idea, if you like, of permanence and inability to easily change something. So you've got a reliable record that lasts the test of time effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. It's reliable because you've got these millions of copies around the world. These millions of copies are all updating simultaneously because they're all being checked simultaneously by those millions of people. So it's effectively independent and decentralized as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that we should look at when we're looking at blockchain is how it performs. So by that I mean the fact that it's primarily decentralized and it's distributed. Maybe if we just explain those two terms so that people can actually grasp what decentralized and distributed means in practice.
Well, effectively, each block on a blockchain or each part of that ledger is not held on a central server in one place. It's held on everyone's computers all around the world. So that's why it's decentralized, because it doesn't necessarily mean that a blockchain has to be public. You can have private and permissioned blockchains. If you think about the most famous blockchain in the world, the most famous blockchain in the world is Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Now, Bitcoin is public. Everyone can access Bitcoin if you've got a Bitcoin wallet, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all blockchains have to be public.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the Bitcoin example can be a dangerous one because often people just associate Bitcoin with blockchain and they think that they go together hand in hand. Well, they do, but that was just kind of one application, one use of the blockchain. We've mentioned public, we mentioned private, and there's also another type of blockchain which we call permissioned. So perhaps if we just walk through those different types of blockchain and explain the differences and how they work in the business context.
Well, if you look at the contrast between public and private, it's sort of incumbent in the name. The public blockchain like Bitcoin means that anyone can get a Bitcoin wallet. Anyone can go and join the blockchain if they would like to, okay? Mm-hmm. But with a private one, you can only join the blockchain if you're invited to do so. So that's if you are given access by a central individual or a central person or a central server, effectively.
Yeah. I suppose a point to make there then is when you're talking about a private blockchain is there's probably an argument that isn't blockchain in its truest sense because, is it really decentralized when you have somebody sat in the middle as an operator, which runs contrary to what, a purist might say a blockchain ought to be?
Well, it is still decentralized because the information, the ledger, it is not being held on a central server because it's held on everyone's computers. The issue, though, becomes in relation to who is giving people permission to hold that blockchain, that ledger, on their computer. And that is often held on a single server by a single person or operator.
So the other one, perhaps my personal favorite type of blockchain, to just explain.
I know you do have personal favorite types of blockchain.
Just to explain how sad I am, would probably be a permissioned type of blockchain. So you could have a public blockchain, but one that's permissioned in that you can ensure that certain people only have, if you like, access protocols that allow them to access certain information.
And blockchain is a tool, okay? It's not an entity. It's not something that can be bolted onto a security system. It's a tool. It's effectively what I've explained, a ledger. And that tool can be used in different ways. And then public, private, and permission blockchains can again be used in different ways in that context as well.
So following up on that point then, that it's a tool, perhaps we just look at now how it might be used as a tool for cybersecurity and data protection. I mean, this was something we were talking about in one of our earlier discussions about explaining all the ways in which GDPR works and the obligations it puts on businesses. Because to me, blockchain has a really important application, and that's that it really adds value when you're trying to look after data, when you're trying to abide by the rules of GDPR.
Well, there are three elements to blockchain which are useful for data protection. The first one we've touched on already is that it's decentralized. The second is that it can be independently audited. And the third is that it removes what's called infinite reproducibility. I think we should just go through those three just so that everyone understands what they are.
Absolutely. So, I mean, in terms of decentralized, maybe if I just give some kind of practical real-world examples. Decentralized means, if you like, there's no central authority that's looking after the information. You know, if I'm a landlord and I'm renting out a property, I might have to go to my estate agent to get an update on what's happening or to see copies of documents. I'm reliant on them being honest with me, showing me the genuine documents so that I've got access to information. So that's a centralized system as opposed to decentralized. I think the other practical example, so that people understand the importance of it in relation to cybersecurity, is if you were to be hacked, let's say, and you've got a decentralized blockchain system, you're in a way better position because all the information isn't available to the hacker. It's not in one place. And similarly, the controls, the powers aren't centralized so that somebody just can't take control of your systems in the way they would do with a traditional hack.
I remember a few years ago, the WannaCry hack, which was the ransomware on the NHS. Now, WannaCry was able to take over the NHS systems because patient records were being held on a central server. But if you had patient records on a blockchain, the patient records would be held over a number of computers. It would effectively be held over every GP's server and computer in the entire country. It would have been impossible for WannaCry to have hacked if those patient records would have been held on a blockchain. The problem, of course, is that if you have a public blockchain and people's personal data, their health concerns or their health records held on a public system, well, then anybody could access that.
Well, that's why I'm such a fan of permission blockchain, because the same blockchain, if you have permissions in place, you can control who can access the information. So, you know, a patient might have a certain level of access, a doctor or consultant, another. So, I mean, if the NHS had a permission blockchain, they would have been in a much better position after WannaCry, because, as you're saying, that in the first place, would WannaCry have been able to sort of grab hold and gain control in the way it did? And secondly, all your information isn't stored in one sort of central reservoir.
And I just want to pick up on your estate agent example when we move on to independently audited. Independent audited means that you can trust that the data on a blockchain is correct.
You're saying you can't trust an estate agent?
Well, you know, I don't want to besmirch any estate agents' names, but if it's independently audited, you can see that, perhaps using your estate agent example, if you're talking about buying a property, there are a number of steps in a chain before you can buy or complete on that property. If each step is independently audited, you know that each step has been completed. So it's not merely the estate agent saying, oh, of course, that person has had their survey. If it's independently audited by whoever's contained within the blockchain, maybe the estate agent, maybe the broker, maybe the mortgage advisor, maybe the person that's selling, maybe the person that's buying. If all of those people are able to access and able to audit, well, then you know that when something is said it's done, it's actually been done.
I mean, perhaps another way of looking at that then is integrity. You know that the information has integrity when it's on the blockchain. And that's also really useful when it comes to data protection, because data protection in the GDPR is all about looking after, safeguarding somebody else's information. And as I say, I can see that blockchain would be very useful for that, because it aligns very well with the thinking behind cybersecurity.
Well, integrity and the removal of infinite reproducibility are sort of coexist, so that people know what the removal of infinite reproducibility is. The best example is to provide in relation to Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. If you have a digital currency, what stops you from just copying that currency and giving it to two people? Why can't I just make two Bitcoins, copy and paste, and give one to you and give one to somebody else? Well, blockchain is the reason that stops you from doing that. If you've written on that ledger, I give one Bitcoin to Dan Hyde, well, then you can't go and give it to somebody else. Removal of infinite reproducibility is one of the reasons that blockchain provides that integrity.
When I'm advising businesses, they'll say to me, can you just give us a health check? Are we GDPR compliant? And when you might go in, it might not just be that they've got lots of information relating to various customers, but they may have lots of copies. And then the question is where are these copies? They can be spread all over the place. They might all be connected to one central place, but over time, different people have taken copies. They might keep them in different places. So I guess the beauty of blockchain and its removal of that reproduction process is really useful when you're trying to put the brakes on things within a GDPR context, and to basically only have the minimum amount of somebody's information that you need.
Which is a requirement of GDPR. You must only hold what is necessary, exactly, or less than what's required. If those are the benefits or the essential features of blockchain, which means that they could be useful for data protection, well, what are the disadvantages?
So the disadvantage, Sam, is effectively going to be the immutability that's at the heart of blockchain. We've given that a fanfare because we've said it has all these advantages because you can rely on it and it provides integrity. The difficulty with immutability is just how hard it is to, if you like, delete or remove something once it's been created. Because at the heart of the GDPR, you have the person whose personal data it is, and they have the right to say to a business, look, I don't think you need that anymore. I have the right to deletion, or I have the right to be forgotten. How can you forget something when it's on the blockchain and potentially could be there forever?
That sounds like a big topic, and I think we should talk about that in another chat.
I agree.
The problem you've also got with blockchain is that it isn't entirely secure. And I think that's something that you've got to consider when you are thinking about your favorite permission blockchains and private blockchains in comparison to public blockchains. Yep. Because there is a security issue when it comes to private or permission blockchains.
Yeah. Do you want to explain what they are, Sam?
There's what's known in public blockchains as the 51% attack. Mm-hmm. And a 51% attack means that if you can take over 51 or 50 plus 1% of the server or information in the blockchain, you can change the whole blockchain.
Okay.
So in a Bitcoin, you would need to own...
Well, I was about to say, in a Bitcoin situation, it's going to be very hard to get yourself into a 51% position, isn't it?
Absolutely. You would have to have so much processing power and so much data that to take over half of the Bitcoin blockchain would be impossible.
Yeah.
But if you did, you could change the entire blockchain. You can change the whole thing so that you could take everyone's Bitcoin off them and give it to you.
Yeah. I mean, I just raise this issue that most traditional systems, you can have that thing happening much more easily.
Yeah.
Whilst it may be a drawback or a disadvantage of blockchain, the bar's still quite high. And as we said, in a Bitcoin context, it would take so much power to get into that 51% position that it's highly unlikely. So it is a possibility. And as you say, it becomes effectively, puts you in such a strong position that it becomes a 100% attack in truth, because you've got complete control. But in the grand scheme of things, at least it's perhaps less risky than some of the current alternatives.
Well, it's interesting that you said about 100% attack, because that is what it would be if it was a permissioned or a private blockchain. Because what I explained before is that even in a permissioned or private blockchain, you have decentralized holders of the ledger. So different people are holding the ledger, but there is a central person that holds the right to provide permission. Now, without getting too technical, if I was a hacker and I hacked the person who was able to give permission, and I took over the ability to give and take away permission, I could take away permission from everybody who had it, give it just to myself, and then I can do whatever I want to the blockchain.
Yeah. So I think earlier in the discussion, I was saying to you, some of the purists would say some types of blockchain aren't pure blockchain because you have this sort of centralized power. I mean, that's an example of why those sorts of arguments are not just academic, they're quite relevant, because the idea of a blockchain is at its best, it stops all of that because you don't have a central authority that's vulnerable.
Absolutely.
So to sum up then, Sam, we've explained essentially what blockchain is, and we've looked at the different types of blockchain, from a public blockchain to a private blockchain and also a permission blockchain. And I guess if you're a business out there, the takeaways are going to be, well, what do you think the important points would be to pull out of all of that?
Well, blockchain is a tool that can be used. And maybe another chat would be how can we, practical examples of how that blockchain could be used.
Yeah. And I think also if you're a business, aside from just how it would be used, you might want to have a good look at the type of blockchain you're using. Is a public blockchain going to work? So for example, that might not work in, say, the NHS type example where you've got confidential information and you want to limit the access. Do you have a private blockchain? We explained the downsides of a private blockchain. And if it's a permissioned blockchain, how is that going to work in practice? Who's going to have what level of permissions? So thanks for listening. Please tune in again to listen to Sam and I discuss these topics around cyber, blockchain, and the tech advantages and disadvantages within business. Thank you, Sam, for your time today, and goodbye, everyone.